Not bad. I'm still on the Costa Rican blend. It's okay. I need to try to make this a little bit more, to reduce the sourness a little. I think I'm going to try lowering the water temperature. I recommend making coffee at 87.5 degrees centigrade. Helps to reduce the sourness a little bit. Right then, welcome everybody. On the stereo today, we have David Kikoski. David Kikoski is a pianist, and he's a jazz pianist, and he's made some really great albums with some pretty nice modern jazz piano trio stuff. I've been listening to that. I was listening to that in the gym this morning. It was really good. I've been listening to this guy for a couple of years actually. Hey Helen, how are you doing? I'm fine, thank you. Alright then, got a question today from Mr. Rasmus. I'm going to get to that in just a second, but before we do, you know what's coming, at least you should know what's coming if you watched yesterday's live stream. You ready for this? You ready? What could this be? Could it be a new book of short stories? Yes, it could. Dutch. I am very proud to present I'm very proud to present short stories in Dutch for beginners. And just like yesterday's book, Brazilian Portuguese, we've now got Brazilian Portuguese and Dutch. And it doesn't stop there, because every day this week I'm going to be showing you a new book. So you better tune back in. Heather says, good, thanks, weather is awful. Heather, are you in London? Are you in the UK by any chance? Because I'm looking outside right now and I have to go out in about 5 minutes. And I am not looking forward to it. Maybe I'll have to take myself a little book of short stories on the train to keep myself preoccupied. All right then. Rasmus asks, how do you go about keeping similar languages separate? Heather's in Manchester. Helen is in Manchester. I have to assume that in Manchester it's about 5 degrees colder than London, so you have my sympathies. Rasmus said, how do you go about keeping the similar languages separate? For me, keeping Danish, Swedish and Norwegian apart has been almost impossible. I feel like I failed miserably, and I speak a Scandinavian mixture, not any of the individual languages. Okay, so I remember back in the day when I first learnt Spanish. Shortly after learning Spanish, I started learning Portuguese, and I spent quite a lot of time in Brazil. And I remember, in particular, I went off to Brazil for some time, obviously speaking lots and lots of Portuguese. And then I came back to London, and I would go out with my Spanish friends, and I would be speaking to them with Spanish, but it was just atrocious. Because what had happened was, like, I had the Spanish still in my brain, but I had Brazilian Portuguese grammar at the forefront of it. So I had Brazilian Portuguese grammar, but also these Brazilian Portuguese words, and they're very, very similar to Spanish. Hi Benoit. Hi Phil. And so what was happening is my Spanish was just like this kind of weird bastardization of the language, which is basically speaking Spanish from a Portuguese brain. It was really weird. And so the challenge for me was, well, how do I go about separating these? Because I came back and I was really shocked to see just how quickly I could lose this language, Spanish, which I had been pretty good at. And so what I did was, this is kind of a unique situation, but I was playing a lot of music at the time, and I would go out in the evenings, and I would go out to these gigs where friends of mine were playing like Brazilian music, and coming to these gigs. These Brazilian gigs would be lots of Spanish speakers, people from Spain, from Ecuador, different places in South America. And so I would have to speak to them in Spanish and Portuguese, like one by one, right? So I'd speak to one guy in Portuguese, then another guy in Spanish. And so I was getting used to swapping, like bang, 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 like this all night, saying something in Spanish and then turning around and saying Portuguese, and then you got the Spanish and Portuguese, and I had to kind of figure out how to navigate that. And that kind of kept that up for weeks and months, and I ended up becoming really expert at switching that little thing in my brain that was like, on those like model train tracks, you pull a lever and it diverts the track and the train goes down. I got very good at switching between the two. But it came from lots and lots of practice doing exactly that. And if I hadn't done that, then I think I could have lost one or even both of them over time. So Rasmus, in your case with Danish, Swedish and Norwegian, I mean, they're very, very similar languages. Like they are like, as Chris is saying in the comments here, they are like 99% the same. And you're going to be understood wherever you go in between those three countries, right? Depending on which one you speak. So you've got a real kind of like logistical challenge here, which is that it doesn't really matter all that much. So I think all you've got to do, really, I mean, if you really want to keep these all apart, then you've got to actually practice keeping them separate. You've got to have practice switching between them. And if you just kind of, I would say, if you spend like 1 month on Danish, 1 month on Swedish, 1 month on Norwegian, you're not really doing what you need to do, because what you need to practice is actually switching between them. So I don't know how you do this logistically. It's quite difficult, but I would try to put yourself in situations where very regularly you are having to switch between the two. So I don't know if you ever go out in a place where you've got Norwegian and Swedish friends, for example, but there, like, I would consciously be switching between the two and just practice it as much as possible and understand that your brain is kind of working to keep those languages separate. I think that's really all you can do in a practical sense. Because I think the most natural thing, actually, I would have thought that, you know, if you got a Swedish guy, a Danish guy and a Norwegian guy like together, and you got them spending lots of time together, they would probably start finding some kind of common language between them which uses different elements of each of their languages, right? Because that's the natural state. It's for that reason that a language like English just changes so much over time, because you've got people from like Brazil to India to Russia, like speaking English, and it adapts and changes as it goes to accommodate the new kind of reality. So it's one of those things which I understand kind of why it would be difficult for you, but I think practically speaking, to do anything about it is going to be quite difficult. And it might just be one of those things where you kind of have to live with that vagueness and just be happy with it. And in that light, I would say just try to concentrate on one language. That's probably the best way forward. Pick whatever language you think is most useful to you, the one that you can use the most, one that you care about the most, and just speak that as much as possible. Aim to get as good as you can with that, because then at the very least in the long term, that language will be so solid that you'll then be able to turn your attention to the other languages. So I hope that was helpful for what it's worth. Rasmus, thank you very much for the question. If you want to ask me questions, head over to the Ollie Richards Fluency Mastermind Facebook group. That's the place to go. And for those of you watching on YouTube, in fact, let me see if I can do this here. Yeah, so this is the Facebook group. You see we've got loads and loads of people in here. We've got, how many people have we got now? I don't know. 11,500 language learners in here, and people are asking me questions, posting pictures, and I promise you these pictures do have something to do with language learning. And here's Rasmus's question here. So if you want to ask me questions, come over and join the group. It's called Ollie Richards Fluency Mastermind. I'd love to have you there. And all that remains for me to do is to say, go and pick up a copy of Short Stories in Dutch by Ollie Richards. You can find it on Amazon. The release date, I believe, is Thursday this week, so you can pre-order now and you'll have it by the end of the week, hopefully. We have a lot of new books coming out. Every day this week, live streams will show you these books. A couple of quick questions here. Manu is Brazilian. He lives in Brazil. Good for you, man. Hi, Fuad. Chanel. Hi, Chanel. Will you be adding Hindi to the short story list of books? Actually, we have been discussing adding Hindi to these books, but it's not imminent, I'm afraid. Special One says, how did you learn Spanish, Ollie? Okay. Special One, great handle, by the way. What I would do, go to Google and search for how to learn Spanish, Ollie, and you'll find an article that comes up from me that shows you basically how I learned Spanish and how I recommend you learn Spanish too. Special One also says, will you recommend to get a girlfriend if you want to learn a new language? It certainly helps. It doesn't have to be a girlfriend though. It could be a boyfriend, or it could be a what's the gender neutral equivalent of a girlfriend or a boyfriend, a partner, a romantic partner of any kind, will help you learn that language, providing they will speak to you in that language, which is not always the case. And if you want to see some discussion on that, you can go back into my Fluency Mastermind Facebook group, scroll down. I've recorded a live video about that a couple of days ago. Anyway, that's it for now. Signing off. I'll see you back tomorrow for more reveals of the next ones in the series. Again, if you want to pick up these books, go to Amazon, search for Ollie Richards short stories. They will pop right up. And I will continue to shamelessly promote these books until my dying days. That's it for now. Goodbye, everybody. Have a great day.